Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to jump into part 2 of my series on Marvel Civil War. I began this a couple days ago. I'll have the link in the wherever in the corner there to the part 1 if you missed it. This is an older series, as I explained in that first video introduction, that I had put out when my channel was just getting going, and it was actually in 2016 before the Captain America Civil War film came out, and I was anticipating it, and in order to talk about it a little bit more and get some context for it, I went and looked at the Marvel Civil War comic event. And in that first video in the series, it's a 3-part series, I talked about what are the implications when our heroes fight each other. Sometimes it's just a money grab, sometimes it's a poorly done decision. It can certainly be overdone, absolutely. But I think that in the case of Marvel Civil War, the comic event, and certainly in the film as well, there are cases in which they do reflect on things that are going on in society. So in that first part of the series, I went back and looked at historical moments throughout Western civilization's mythology, all the way back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, and talked about some important instances when our heroes fought each other and kind of what that meant, delving into it a little bit. In this part 2 of the series, I actually focus on specifically what was going on at the time when Marvel Civil War was released in the comics. Talking about what was going on in our culture at the time, the anxieties that gave way to that book. And you might have heard me in different videos elsewhere, or commentaries, I really do hold up the Marvel Civil War comic. I know that some people didn't like it, but I do hold it up as a wonderful example of, as I said in the first video, how to recontextualize the tensions and anxieties that are going on in any given moment in society, recontextualize it in mythology, because that's what mythology should do. It should take the things that we're dealing with as a culture, it should recontextualize them in a story, in a myth of heroes and villains and different things like that, so that we can gain a better understanding of them. Spin it around a different way so we can think about it in a new way. That's the first thing it should do. The second thing it should do is that it should not present the anxieties of any given time too specific to that time period. This is the problem we see current day Marvel writers fall into all the time. All the time. This is the nonsense of having villains look like Donald Trump, or different characters speak out against any kind of like current pressing feminist or immigration issue or something like that in the day. Well, this dates the comic, and it feels really good to the writer just to get that off their chest or whatever, and to preach their side of things. But it doesn't give the comic any staying power for a number of reasons. The story's not there, but also it dates the comic. Something like Marvel Civil War, though, you can read that today, even though that specifically took place in terms of the context of the Patriot Act and the struggle or the debate between personal freedom and security. The cool thing about the comic, and the Millar must have realized this on some level, is that debate between personal freedom and security has been going on in our country for a long time. It continues to go on today. So he presented it and reflected on that time period in a way in this story that didn't clearly make it an allegory, like, oh, this side are the Republicans and this side are the Democrats or something like that. He didn't use watchwords. He didn't use any specific elements that could be dated directly back to what was going on in current events at the day. He made it timeless. He made the struggle and the tensions of that story timeless so that we can still reflect on it today, and it speaks to our time today, speaks to times previous before this as well. So that's about all I'll say here by way of introduction, so I don't jump into what I actually say in the video. But I hope you enjoyed this part 2 of my presentation, and part 3 will be up in a few days. But until then, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the hero stories you love.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. And welcome to part 2 of my series on Marvel's Civil War, Why Our Heroes Fight Each Other. In part 1, we traced the concept of heroes battling one another back to the oldest surviving texts of mythology. We discovered how heroes often fight to work out tensions in a culture's values or philosophies. In the case of Marvel's 2006 comic event Civil War, the tension was between freedom and security. After a group of young superheroes carelessly attack a group of supervillains, the result is an explosion encompassing a nearby elementary school. The public cries out for oversight, for a check on superhero activity. Iron Man feels responsible for the actions of the young heroes, whom his generation inspired. so he rouses a faction to support the proposed Superhero Registration Act that would see each powered individual's identity registered with, trained by, and on the payroll of the government. When the act passes into law, Iron Man leads his heroes to enforce it. Captain America leads a resistance. He believes superheroes should be apart from government and politics, lest heroes turn into the superpowered pawns at the command of corruption. The conflict, then, is over a new law that promised to provide a greater measure of security in return for encroaching on the individual freedoms of a group of people designated as a possible threat. In 2006, when the comic began its run, the United States was well into the War on Terror, and well into the debate over the Patriot Act. Supporters argued that the act was necessary to give government the ability to protect the country in the post-9/11 world of terrorism. Opponents argued that the act violated a large number of individual liberties and treated target groups of citizens as guilty until proven innocent. Though the War on Terror and the Patriot Act were unprecedented events, the core of the debate was nothing new in the unique mix of American philosophy. From its infancy, in the journey from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitutional Convention, the United States government has been a tension between the need to centralize power for safety and the need to preserve individual liberty through local government. While the Patriot Act is still an issue today, the debate has evolved into even greater proportions. The nearing presidential election appears to be between the most extreme candidates within their platforms that the nation has ever been forced to seriously consider. Supporters cheer for Donald Trump, who proposes to register all Muslims within the United States. The word socialism is now proudly proclaimed by members of the Democratic Party, where once it was avoided and concealed. And more voters express a refusal to support any of the candidates offered by the two-party system. In this climate, the film version, Captain America: Civil War, is released. Our heroes aren't fighting over the Patriot Act, healthcare, or religious freedom specifically, but their own conflict over superhero oversight and whether or not the government can be trusted reflects our own. The comic, and most likely the film, however, is more than just a shallow allegory or a metaphor. The comic, for example, does what good art should. It reflects the complexity of life and philosophies. In Part 1, we mentioned how Iron Man represents industriousness, ingenuousness, and resourcefulness, and Captain America stands for selflessness, compassion, and hope. While values such as industriousness and selflessness do not necessarily preclude one another, they coexist with a certain amount of tension. They encapsulate focuses on both the individual and the whole. We can't simply call Iron Man the capitalist individualist in the story, for he represents the will of the people, most of whom it appears in the end support the Registration Act. And Captain America, the self-sacrificing soldier, leads a rebellion against the system because of his own unique and individual perspective on history. Instead of representing different sides to a conflict, each character represents a different attempt to balance it. Though Cap surrenders after realizing his fight would end up being with the people he was trying to save, Iron Man comes to regret his own actions after Cap's assassination. Mythology doesn't exist to tell us what cause to support or what candidate to vote for. Its job is to abstract our anxieties and place them in a different context, played out by characters who reflect our values. What we take from the stories is personal and either strengthens our convictions or convinces us of their error. In whichever decision we or our country makes, mythology can help us make it thoughtfully, even if the decision is to resist. Let me know any further connections you see between the state of politics in either the 2006 Civil War or the current film. I stuck to general topics for the sake of time, but feel free to be specific. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the third and final installment of this series. We'll explore how Marvel's Civil War was also a commentary on the history of comic books and superheroes themselves. Thanks for watching.